Hello everyone, 大家好. Welcome to another episode of Second Gen's Liberated Panda. Today we have a very special guest. You might remember today's guest from the award-winning documentary First Vote, directed by director Yi Chen, who we spoke with last week. Joining us today is the one and only Kaiser Kuo, founder and host of the Sinica podcast, editor-at-large of SupChina, and former member of the rock band Tang Dynasty, or Tang Cao, and much, much more.
More than just a rocker. Kaiser Kuo, a Chinese-American freelance writer and rock musician, co-founded the rock band Tang Dynasty when he came to China in 1989. Later, in 2001, he built up another band known as Spring and Autumn, which was an ethnic-oriented heavy metal rock group. It was also then that he started writing a column for the English-language magazine The Beijinger, a role that lasted 10 years. In 2007, Kuo began taking on top communications roles with Ogilvy. Then he joined Baidu in 2010 as senior manager in public communications. Born in the US, Kuo arrived in China in his early 20s, which cultivated a deep attachment to the country. In 2010, Kaiser started The Sinica Show, a current affairs podcast based in Beijing that invites prominent Chinese journalists and observers to participate in discussions about Chinese political and economic affairs. After more than 2 decades in China with his family, Kaiser Kuo has become not only an icon in China's rock scene, but also a figure bridging the gap between China and the foreigners trying to make sense of it.
Hello, Kaiser.
Hi, Angel.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us on Liberated Panda today. Let's kind of jump right in because there's so much ground to cover today.
Sure.
But before we get to all of that, you've had such a fascinating journey so far in your life. Would you please tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're up to right now?
Sure. My name is Kaiser Kuo. I was born in the U.S. here to parents originally from mainland China via Taiwan. You can probably figure that out by the spelling of my surname, Kuo. They were always interested in keeping us connected to China, the 4 kids that they had here, but I was the one on whom it really stuck. So beginning really in college, I took a very, very keen interest in the PRC. Went there a couple of times during college, and I started going there when I was still in high school. And after I finished college, I went and lived there for a year. That was a really momentous year. It was 1988 to 1989. During my time there, I started a rock band with a couple of guys that went on to become quite well known in mainland China, at least. And then really that kept me going back. And so I spent a lot of time there during the 1990s. And after just dropping out of graduate school, I went back to China in 96 and ended up staying for 20 years. I came back in 2016 with a wife and 2 children in tow.
So you're really like a creature of both worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. I certainly, am more fluent and maybe more culturally literate in American culture than I am in Chinese, but I'm trying to fix that.
Same here. And I think you're doing a great job with SupChina and your podcast.
Well, thank you.
No, not at all. Thank you. Listening to it's very enlightening, and I like the fact that you have all sorts of guests on. There's like this confluence of very neutral reporting, which I appreciate, and people with very like objective opinions. So
I try our best, yeah.
Right. But I enjoy your articles as well, and I admire your dedication to moving to a swing state this last election. I live in New York personally, so my vote doesn't really necessarily count as much as someone in a swing state. But I do sometimes wish I do have the potential to sway votes. And that's one of the things that immediately drew me to you when I was watching the documentary, because I was like, here is a person that is so passionate about politics that he's willing to uproot his life and, move to a swing state. And so would you tell me a little bit of your thought process in doing that?
I think the whole bit about me moving to a swing state just because it was a swing state is a little bit of an exaggeration. That was definitely a nice to have. It was one of the many factors that we considered. I think that all other things being equal, if it was here and somewhere else that was not a swing state, we would have decided to come here. But all of the things were not equal. There were plenty of other compelling reasons that we wanted to come to this area of North Carolina, not the least of which is that, there's an excellent university cluster here, not only UNC, but also Duke. And when you have a big university cluster, in America anyway, you have a good Chinese community. And when you have a good Chinese community, you have good Chinese restaurants and grocery stores. And these are things that we cannot live without. So, there were a lot of considerations: the weather, the culture of the place. And yeah, I'd spent some time here. I have a good friend who lives here and been to a wedding and on some reporting trips here. So I quite liked the area.
Yeah, it's quite.
Yeah, I mean, but the politics were important to me.
And do you find that you're getting like a lot of your political activism done over there because of the community and everything?
Yeah, I think, there were a couple of things that I've gotten involved with, not more than, I wouldn't say that I'm somebody who's, an exemplary political activist or anything, but yeah, I've gotten involved in phone banking, phone bank captaining, and doing some canvassing when that was still possible. I worked on a local election for the first elected official of Chinese descent in North Carolina at a township level. So she was a town councilor here. She's a really great woman who was born in Shanghai.
Is she still in public service?
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, and and she's a fantastic politician. She's going places. Yeah.
So you have an insider perspective on how to get somebody elected.
I had almost nothing to do with her getting elected. I wouldn't want to take any credit. I mean, I recorded a couple of commercials for her, radio spots and things like that. So I have experience with sound, and canvassed, made some phone calls and that kind of thing. But I didn't plan her strategy. No, of course not.
Right, you just got to see it.
Right. But it's stuff that matters a lot to me personally.
Right. And I'm sure it informs you as well in your discussions in your podcast and your writing in China and everything.
Sure. I mean, to some extent, although, we're really focused on China issues and not so much on the U.S., but, U.S.-China is something that I care very much about. And sort of by default, because, we had done the show for the first 6 years in Beijing. And after moving here, not only because of all the, the vicissitudes of the U.S.-China relationship during the Trump administration, but also, because of my proximity here, like to D.C. and to New York, U.S.-China relations became by default sort of a major topic that we covered.
Yes.
Less than domestic Chinese politics, less than sort of the business world in China, which had been mainstays before.
Yes, it's really dominated our news cycle, and it's something that we haven't seen ever before Trump. You hardly get to see anything about China unless they're visiting for a state visit or something. So it's refreshing that we're having U.S.-China talk, because I know so many of us.
I don't know if it's. I'd almost rather it not be in the news. I think things were a whole lot better when it wasn't, a constant, item in the news. It wasn't at the forefront of people's consciousness. As Will Wiseman once said, the best thing that ever happened to U.S.-China relations, I mean, maybe the real greatest force in favor of a stable relationship was the complete apathy of most of the American public and most of American officialdom.
That's interesting.
The less they pay attention, the better. Yeah, if you ask me.
So you think that it would be easier to accomplish our goals if there was just less noise from the public?
Not just from the public, but also from officials who want to rouse the public in action. I think if you look at what was the best period in U.S.-China relations, it was probably from after September 11th in 2001 till about the Olympics, 2008. I mean, you can barely name a thing to really have roiled the waters in that relationship during that time. And why? It's because America was entirely distracted. And what was China like during that time? It was increasingly liberal. I mean, it was increasingly tolerant. It was more, if not participatory, at least it was more deliberative. It was more, I think,
cooperative.
Yeah, not just cooperative with the U.S., but I'm talking domestically. It was considerably less repressive, right?
Right.
So I think it's an important thing. I mean, I think practically the best thing we can do is to worry about other things.
The reason behind that is because Xi Jinping came into power.
No, I don't.
Oh.
No,
okay.
I think that it was already well underway before he came to power. I'm somebody who very much believes that the times create the leader, not the leader creates the times. I think that, irrespective of who we had in office in China, whether it had been Bo Xilai or whatever. I don't think that it's because of Xi Jinping. I think that Xi Jinping became, the really autocratic and quite repressive person that he is because of the situation in, the political situation, both domestically and internationally at the time that he took office.
That's actually really interesting to Chinese Americans like myself, because, we're not exposed to what the Chinese community are talking about because of the language barrier. So, when we read American articles, that a lot of the tensions between U.S. and China to Xi Jinping's rise in power. So it's
Right.
interesting to get your view on that, because you live there, so you would know. And so often I read the articles, and I'm Chinese and I'm from Shanghai myself, and I'm like, wait, they got China so wrong. So I'm glad we have you on to kind of to give us the real scoop on what's going on over there, and why you think tensions are so high. Do you think it's partly because just Trump's aggressive rhetoric against China?
Again, I think that it was already well underway before Trump, and it was well underway before Xi. I think you can see the very clear downturn already beginning in 2009, and that was for a whole bunch of reasons. It's impossible, I think, to just simply place the blame on any one individual. This was already well underway. If you want, I can go through my various theories as to why, but I think just at a very superficial level, China during that time, by design, had a decentralized leadership. I think that Hu Jintao, we all understand, he was really just primus inter pares, that it was a collective leadership, and that had its good points for sure, but it also, I think, allowed, it was a not very efficient leadership. A lot of corruption, a lot of power tended to accrue in these sorts of spheres of influence or base areas for some of these leaders. There was a lot of factionalism during that time, and when you saw, there was bound to be a reaction to that it happened at the same time as the United States had sort of conspicuously shown that it had botched its stewardship of the global financial system, 2008, 2009. And when there was so much negative attention being paid to China that had really not really paid attention to what the rest of the world was saying about it quite as much, around the time of the Olympics, especially, since there was so much attention focused on it, a lot of things were easily amplified. A lot of misunderstandings were really easily amplified. And China at the same time, it was sort of feeling its oats. It was feeling, way more of a sense of historical destiny at that point, feeling like it was ready to move beyond hide your power and bide your time, and to have a more active voice in global governance. So, and I think also the United States was not careful about how its messaging landed on the ears in Beijing. It was pushing some ideas that I don't think it understood Beijing found to be, existentially threatening.
Mm-hmm.
Doctrines, things like internet freedom. I don't think the United States understood the extent to which, in the context of color revolutions and the early Arab Spring stirrings, it was really sensitive to these things. It really felt like that was tantamount to calling for regime change.
It feels like to me, as someone, and we'll get to your SupChina article, that everyone finds intriguing, why you think so many first-generation immigrants are pro-Trump. We'll get to that, but you said something interesting, and I kind of wanted to kind of follow up on that. To me, to those of us, some of us in America at least, it seems like we left China alone for so long because Americans historically do. We don't want to get involved. Like, for instance, World War II, we didn't want to get involved until Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. When we see things like Huawei trying to build like a 5G network, and when we see China trying to expand their sphere of influence, to our detriment sometimes, it seems, and maybe intentional, maybe not intentional, it seems like a threat to us. And that's why, from my perspective, it seems like America kind of had to jump in and say, hey, listen, we need to, stop this, influence into our culture at least, or democracy or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think exactly how China is meddling in or causing any kind of a threat to American
It's not
democracy.
threat. It's more like using like these methods that like like our fear of China is like, okay, they're going to use Huawei to like steal our secrets, right? There's like we read articles where like you have professors who send critical information to China, and there's just like that sense of like the CCP wanting like kind of like infiltrating America, like
They're not
very.
doing such a good job of it, though, right? I mean, if there are these influence operations and stuff like that, I don't see them exactly working. American opinion of China has decreased steadily as concerns over, these influence operations have ramped up, which is funny because that suggests to me that they're not very good at it if they're doing it.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's interesting. I mean,
No,
I
I
actually
mean,
think.
I mean, it's not just it's true. I mean, show me how CCP's influence operations are succeeding in America. I mean, are
Yeah,
there now legions of people who are fans and who want to replace, American democracy with Chinese-style authoritarianism? I don't see that happening. I don't think that there's a major threat to our way of life coming from China. I don't think that China is trying to export its model to the rest of the world at all. I just think that a lot of that is just utter malarkey.
so maybe not from like a political perspective, but maybe more from like a financial and economic perspective, right? Or like intellectual property theft, right? Uh,
Sure.
I mean that's a huge issue that we see, not playing by the same rules as everyone else. And I think if that was resolved, like if they did, play by the same rules, they did have like a
Is that
proper.
all we're really worried about, though? I mean, if it's just a matter of intellectual property theft and not playing by WTO rules, that seems like our response to that has been wildly disproportionate. Now
Absolutely.
we've managed to securitize the entire relationship. Every goddamn thing now we look through the lens of national security at it. A fucking app like TikTok suddenly becomes like this threat to national security. I mean, we're off of our rocker here. It's insane.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the main reasons why it's hard for me as a Chinese person, a Chinese American, to support Trump, because yeah, I completely agree with you.
But it's not just Trump, though, right? I mean, it's plenty of people, in the current Biden administration are also, insist on seeing China through this national security lens, right? And have gotten it into their minds that there's just some existential competition with China that it's just, to me, it's bonkers. It's utterly bonkers.
So speaking of the article that you wrote, why you think first generation immigrants, Chinese immigrants, are so they gravitate so much towards Trump, I want to kind of briefly go through some of like the point items that you mentioned. I'll quickly run through the list. You mentioned affirmative action, sexual conservatism, racism, Schadenfreude, Hillary hawkishness, Zhen Xiaoren, and Wei Junzi. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So all of these things, to some extent. I mean, look, I wrote this thing. What it was now?
2016.
Yeah. It was 2016. So we're getting on 5 years ago. Obviously, a lot has changed. We didn't know who Trump was as president at that point. But yeah, I think a lot of it still stands. But there's one thing that I didn't talk about in that piece that I really should have, that I think I would now move very much to the top of any list that wanted to explain, the support that we see, not just among Chinese here in the United States, but also in China for them. And that is this. I think it reflects more than anything the sorts of the values and the social realities of China during the reform and opening period, the kind of brutal, amoral pragmatism that is the dominant ethos in China. It's the I'm going to screw you before you screw me. I don't care who I have to step on. I'm getting ahead. This almost kind of unbridled egoism that you see so much in China these days, and that is a function of course of the stage of history where they're at, and the scarcity of resources and the size of the population and a lot of other things. But I think that's really the most important explanatory variable. A lot of the people who came to the United States from China, you know, came expressly for one reason, that's that they and their children could have, you know, material advantages.
Right.
And so that naturally predisposes them to want lower taxes, to want less competition from other immigrants, to want to, you know, tear down anything that gets in the way of their children getting into the best universities. So yeah, I think that's most of it right
One
there.
of my questions
Right.
is
No,
how do we bridge that understanding gap between the, you know, Chinese people that purely occupy the Chinese speaking world? Like they'll live in a place where, you know, they'll either live in a place that's like exclusively like Chinese, where surrounded by Chinese people, or they'll only watch like Chinese news and Chinese like commentary. And then like people like me who are, you know, only watching American news and living amongst Americans and have no idea what's really going on and what Chinese people are like talking about. Like, how do we like bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, first of all, I want to make clear that I don't think there's anything wrong with only wanting to live in one world or the other. My preference is to try to live in both and try to understand both. But, you know, people have different priorities. People have different, you know, calculuses of opportunity cost, because it takes time to do that. I don't think there's also anything inherently wrong with, you know, only getting your news in Chinese if there are ways to prevent, you know, fake news, the spread of false information, disinformation, misinformation, and unfortunately, both media spheres are really rife with it. Both the Chinese language media sphere and the English language one. I mean, if you look, I know so many of, for example, my wife's friends who are utterly poisoned by this, you know, Guo and Gui or Falun Gong shit. I mean, who just are unable to distinguish that from, you know, sensible, actual fact-based reporting. And it's very disturbing. And it's hard to break people out of it. I think that it starts, as all things, with a little bit of empathy, right? I mean, you've got to understand, you got to try to put yourself in their shoes. Right now, somebody comes to the United States from China, and it's easier, so much easier than it was when my parents came to the United States in the 50s, for example, to live in an exclusively Chinese world. You can be here. You know, there's signage out there, there's translation apps, there's all the media that you could ever want to consume in a lifetime at your fingertips in your native language. There's television, there's subtitled films. I mean, it's all here. And most of all, there's a gigantic community of other people. So yeah, I mean, it's very easy to not. And I don't think that it's, you know, we're past that melting pot idea a long time ago. We shouldn't insist that assimilation or you know, believe that assimilation into, you know, white dominated American society is a better thing, right? So I want to be careful that we.
Right. So when I mean assimilation, I guess I mean like taking a more tolerant view of maybe even like, you know, liberal. I know that's like a dirty word these days, but like a liberal view towards a lot of like, but for like a lot of people, like I feel like, you know, when you say liberal, people like it's like a dirty word now, but it's bizarre. It's bizarre, right? It's bizarre. But I just feel like assimilation is like another way, like a euphemism for saying tolerance, for saying like you know, acceptance of like
yeah, I think it's if we want to say like tolerant and pluralistic or whatever and open, let's use those words. I mean, that's not what assimilation really has meant historically, right? I mean, assimilation, it has a different meaning, I think, for most people. So, I mean, I wouldn't use that word to describe, you know, the adoption of the good values in American society. But I get what you mean.
What word would you use for that then?
I'd be a little more precise. I'd say, you know, tolerant, you know, appreciative of diversity, or anti-racist, or anti-sexist, or, you know, not fucking homophobic, right? I mean, what we actually see though is there is a whole political party in this country that is that encourages you to resist the adoption of those good values, right? And that pats you on the back for being, you know, for speaking your mind, for not being politically correct or whatever.
Right.
And that's, yeah. So I think this is one of the things that I see, is that this political party is sort of encouraging and proactively trying to bring out the worst habits that unfortunately some immigrant populations bring to the United States. Their own, like, really old school conservatism, their old world sexual mores, their old world sort of religious values, or their old world ideas of the unassailable place of the nuclear family, right?
Right.
And
right.
this lack of acceptance of other forms of family.
So like
they want to encourage that, right?
Right. Or maybe like more outdated views, which is, I know, by very definition, conservatives, right? Like conservatism and everything. I'm a registered Republican. I've been a lifelong Republican. And the reason why I'm a Republican, I mean, I don't support them now, and I don't support President Trump, and I wish they would form another party. But
so do I. Love to see that.
Yeah, it would be great, because I mean, there's a struggle for the Republican soul right now, right? We're either going to go the way of QAnon and extremism, or we're going to hopefully come back more to the center. And maybe the Republican Party is so poisonous right now that it can't be rescued. Who knows, right? So that's for me, it's sad to see. But I'll tell you why I'm a Republican, and it's because I think they do a very good job of like recruiting immigrants and making them feel included and giving them like a space. And I think as a new immigrant,
really? That's really strange to me. I mean, why is it then that the vast majority of immigrants who do join a political party are Democrats?
I think it's because they live in like democratic cities, right? But all the Chinese people that I know are Republicans. So I mean, I'm just saying this from anecdotally as to like why me and like my family.
I mean, it does not accord with the statistical fact.
Okay,
I mean, in New York City.
Interesting.
It does. I mean, the still overwhelmingly immigrant Chinese, I think it's like close to 70% voted for Joe Biden.
Okay. Wow, that's actually shocking. All right. Did you know what the statistic is for first generation immigrants?
Yeah, this is first generation immigrants. It's
70%.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, you honestly would not pick up on that based on like.
Well, it's because the Republicans are such loudmouths. I mean, they're the ones who are screaming on Weibo and on Weixin all the time, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah, they make it seem. I mean, there's not like a Chinese for Biden group that would buy like airplane whatever. I mean, they're those guys are just like weirdly fanatic.
Yeah, it's almost like cultish, which was alarming to me, because I did see my family fall into that. And part of trying to accomplish with this channel is to help people like understand fundamental American values, like not values, American civics, right? Like, what is the Constitution? What is America? Start from the very basics and build our way up, and that way we kind of have like an informed group of like informed Chinese Americans, so we can actually have like discussions about policies versus other irrelevant things. So I think I'm hoping to accomplish that, and that's why I was asking you, like, how do I bridge the understanding gap? Because I know for you it's quite easy, because you have like you're entrenched in like both worlds, whereas for me, I have to like Google Translate like what people are saying on Twitter, and I have to like get subtitles, and I just don't resonate as much with the Chinese viewers. So that's why like I was hoping you would like give advice as to like how you would approach it and everything like that.
I think you put your finger on a really big problem. I think I mean, this is something my wife tells me all the time, is that when you're on those platforms, when you're on Weixin especially, there are, for example, let's take it'll be a group organized around something else, so say in the community around the local Chinese school, or around parenting issues or education issues. That's notionally what this group is supposed to be about. But invariably over the last 4 years, it's always turned into politics. And invariably, it's the Republicans who are actually a numerical minority, the Trump supporters, who scream the loudest, who are just, the ones who insist always on bringing it back to politics, and who, are screaming bloody murder at being deplatformed if anyone should suggest that, hey, maybe let's not talk about politics on this this group that's focused on the local Chinese school. Right. They're the ones who are freaking out about it, and that's a problem, is that they're not hearing passionate Democrats talking about it. I mean, it comes down to personality. I mean, so much of it is personality, right? I can tell without having to speak about anything political. I can talk to a newly arrived Chinese immigrant, somebody who's been here up to 20 years, and we can talk about anything else, and I can tell just by their character, by their personality, what their partisanship is.
Interesting.
I mean, it's almost always those those sort of big swinging dick businessman guys, or it's those kind of busybody women, or it's those just really kind of materialistic, always talking. They're always going to be fucking Republicans, right? Oh, and then somebody who's sort of more scholarly, a little more quiet, a little more studious. They're not going to be, right. It's every time. It's like that every time.
Well, no, that's interesting. Well, I mean, because I mean, if you were to look at someone like me and we're talking, what would your assumption be?
I'd probably guess you as some sort of centrist, right?
Right. I think I'm more independent leaning right now, so, or maybe libertarian or something like that. Okay, well, pretty spot on. And obviously, you're very Democrat, and I can tell.
Unfortunately, due to the unprecedented winter storm here, New York was not spared, and we lost our Wi-Fi right here and wasn't able to say goodbye to our wonderful guest today, Kaiser Kuo. But we just want to thank him for joining us today for this wonderful and informative chat. I had a lot of fun talking to Kaiser. I learned a lot. And I urge everybody to check out SupChina.com and the Sinica podcast. I included the links in the description below. And I just want to let everyone know that because of the tensions between US and China right now, not a lot of advertisers are willing to advertise with SupChina. So one of their main sources of revenue is through subscriptions. And the subscription is $88 a month, and I believe it's lower, like $10 or lower for a monthly fee, but you can check out the pricing and everything else at the website. They also have free content as well, and you can register or not register to even look at the content. But I fully encourage everyone to support our fellow Asian American, fellow Chinese American in producing the amazing content that they've been producing, and definitely hope that Kaiser comes back and we can have more conversations in the future as US-China relations continue to develop. And I hope I see you guys here next week on Second Gen's Liberated Panda. Bye. Oh, and one more thing. I just wanted to show a clip of Kaiser Kuo's 10-year anniversary podcast for the Sinica podcast, and just a short clip to play us out. So have a good day. Bye guys. Until next time.
Welcome everyone to the Sinica Podcast special 10-year anniversary interactive podcast. We began life in April 2010 in Beijing, and for the first 6 years it was just something that Jeremy and me did for fun. It's no less fun now, of course, but as you probably know, for the last 4 years we've been powered by our friends at SupChina.